Welcome to the TheBrick.Church YouTube channel. My name's Taylor and I get the great privilege of being your student pastor here at The Brick. And right now is like the perfect moment for you to go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It gives you the ability to know everything that's happening at the TheBrick.Church, and our hope is our resource to you. It's an opportunity for you to get everything you need to walk out what God's called you to as a fully devoted follower of Christ. So without further ado, let's lean into the message and hear what God has for us.
So we're jumping into a series called Character of a Dreamer. We're actually in week number 3. And our goal for this series is to help you guys, help us as a church to really have the character it takes to dream the dream God has for us, to develop and instill that character. Now today, we're going to go a little bit more difficult. Okay, we're going to take a step into what it means to have God's character that is maybe a harder step. It's deciding to be faithful to the dreams God has for you, to have the character in the darkest of seasons and the most difficult, okay? So what we've come from is we've talked about Joseph and his story and his audacity, and we've tried to really challenge you to have the audacity to dream. Honestly, let's not call ourselves stupid, but it's kind of crazy, right? To think that we believe the creator of the universe is thinking about us. The expanse of everything is just insanity to think how large our universe is. And the one who created that cares about me. And not only cares about me, but has put dreams inside of me and has a plan for my life. If I'll follow, he'll bring to fruition. That takes audacity. Last week, we talked about protecting it, talked about finding it and protecting it. Like, all right, if I'm going to have the audacity to believe that God would use me and put dreams in my life, then I'll do everything I can to protect it. And so as we jump into faithfulness in every season, what I want to do is create a definition. What does it mean to be faithful? We have a lot of church words, a lot of things that we say just, be faithful. What does that even, what does it mean to be faithful? Let's put some definitions before we continue on into Joseph's story to what it means to be faithful. What we're going to see in Joseph's story is that he is adhering to a couple of scriptures that he hasn't yet heard. What I want you to bring out is how he's listening to these scriptures. These scriptures show up in the Gospels. And in the Gospels, Jesus says, listen, if you want to know what the whole book is about, if you want to look at all the Old Testament, Moses' teaching, all the prophets, there are 2 commandments that are the essential. They're the measurement. They're what everything is trying to get us to are these 2 things, these 2 big commands. And here's what Jesus says in Mark chapter 12, verses 30 and 31. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. 2 commands, everything falls under these. One of the passages where Jesus quotes is he says, everything hinges on this. It is what makes the door move. Everything is about this thing. There's nothing greater than this, nothing more important than this. If you want to measure, if you're doing it right, you are loving God with everything you've got and you're loving your neighbor. Now, Jesus is quoting, at least in the first verse, he's quoting Deuteronomy. And he's telling you, love the Lord your God. And then he tells you how to love God. If you believe he's the creator of the universe, if you believe you can trust him, then do what he says. It's not that complicated. With all your heart, with all your mind, with all your strength, do what he's called you to do. Remind yourself of what he's called you to do. Write it on the doorway, put it around your forehead, write it wherever you have to remember the commands and the call of God. It's real simple. Just do what he's called you to do. And when you get there, when you really get to the spot where you're trusting God enough, then you can be in a spot where you can love people well. Where you loving people isn't conditional on whether or not they benefit you, right? Jesus tells us that it's simple to love people who love us back. That's not a problem. How about loving people that don't like you, that don't add benefit to your life? That's the love your neighbor that Jesus is getting to. Like, how do you love people no matter what they offer you? And it's about being faithful to God by loving someone else. This is faithfulness. Faithfulness is loving God and loving people. That's what it means to be faithful. And what we're going to dive into is the challenge to be faithful in every season, right? Some of you may have a struggle where it's hard to be faithful when everything's going well, right? Everything's crushing, everything's happening, business is going well, and you look back 2 months and you're like, we ain't been to church. I haven't prayed. We don't even pray before meals now. Like all of a sudden things are going so well. I'm not sick. My marriage is okay. My kids are okay. Things are just gelling. Everything's good. And you look back and go, I forgot all about God. For some of you, it's difficult in those seasons. For others of you, a lot of you, it's difficult when it goes bad. There's a season where learning to be faithful and trusting God when stuff happens, when the marriage is falling apart, when the kids aren't acting right, when the health diagnosis comes in, that's a struggle. You're like, God, I just don't know why you let me go through this. I don't know why I went through that. Like those struggles are being faithful, but being faithful, to have the character of a dreamer, it's learning to be faithful in every season. And with Joseph, he goes so far in. Like he's the character I dream to have. Hopefully I don't have to go through it to test it, because what he goes through, I don't want to go through, but I hope that I have the character and I want to grow in the type of character that is faithful in every season. So to catch up to Joseph's story, Joseph was the youngest of 12. And he had a dream about his brothers bowing down to him, and they didn't like it. Of course, if you're a youngest, you understand. Like, man, I wish I could get them back. Pick on me one more time. Just wait till I'm older, right? That's, if you're a youngest, you know what I'm talking about. Just like, do it again. Steal my stuff one more time. Hit me one more time. Make fun of me one more time. I wish I would. I had a dream about you. Well, his brothers don't like it, of course. And they apparently don't have much character, because they try to kill him. And one of the brothers stands up and is like, no, let's not kill him. Let's sell him into slavery. So they sell him into slavery. They're like, that's a good idea. Let's see if we make some money off of this. So they sell him into slavery. And that would be a moment where you would think maybe Joseph would abandon, and he doesn't. He stays faithful in slavery, and he stays committed, and he keeps following, keeps trusting, keeps following, keeps trusting. He works his way up in Egypt in Potiphar's house. He's faithful. He's doing good. And we saw how he was faithful in that season. And how in that moment, whenever he might have wanted to question God or not follow God, he was still faithful. And Potiphar's wife, the guy he's a slave to, comes after him. And she sees, as we saw last week, that he's well built, he's handsome. Don't close your eyes and picture that, ladies. That may get into sin realm, all right? He's well built and handsome. She likes what she sees. She goes after him. He runs half naked out of the house because he's so willing to protect it. And so now we catch up to him. After that, we find out he's in prison. He's in an ancient Egyptian dungeon, essentially. And he's stuck in this spot, and we're going to see how the dreams play out, how he keeps staying faithful, right? If you're going to be faithful when your siblings sell you into slavery, that's hard. When you're going to be faithful when you were good for so many years and you did a good job as a slave and it still cost you and you still go into it, then it even gets more difficult. Like, really, are you really going to continue to trust God? Are you really going to be faithful to God? Are you really going to do it? And we're going to see Joseph do that, and we're going to see how to maybe be inspired by what that means and how to do that. So Joseph's in prison, and he continues to elevate. They have like a hierarchy where they actually put their prisoners to work, so he's overseeing other prisoners. And we're going to see that he's loving God and loving people. So what happens is there are two guys in there that are one of Pharaoh's officials, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh is the top guy in Egypt. And Pharaoh apparently has a bad week. It seems like if you read through the story, they didn't really do anything. Pharaoh's just mad. He's having a bad week, and he sends a bunch of his officials to the prison. And so they're in there, and Joseph's like, hey, what's wrong with you guys? They seem sad on a day. Like, what's wrong? Well, I'm in prison. I don't know. That seems like a silly question, right? Like, how many people are like, this is the greatest day ever. I woke up in prison, free housing and free food. This is fantastic. Like, I don't know what he thinks they're going to do, but he notices they're extra sad, right? And in the midst of all that he's gone through, he still is loving God and loving people. It's an insane amount of character, but let's read these verses and see how he's loving God and loving people. So they're sad, and he comes to them to check on them. Verses 7 and 8 of Genesis chapter 40. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were with him in custody in his master's house, why do you look so sad today? They told him, we both had dreams, but there's no one to interpret them. Joseph responded, don't interpretations belong to God? Tell them to me. Okay? Joseph in prison, been through a lot. And in just these two verses, he's doing two things that shock me, that impress me, that I think, man, it takes someone to have audacity. It takes someone to have faithfulness in this moment. First, he cares enough about other people that are next to him to say, hey, you good? He cares enough to love them. Listen, if I'm in prison, I'm trying to just survive it. Let's just get through. I'm going to do my time and get out. I ain't worried about nobody else. I'm going to mind my business. Not Joseph. Joseph cares enough in the midst of his darkest hours to say, hey, how are you doing? Why are you so sad today? What's going on with you? He's loving people in the midst of his darkest hour. That's the kind of character I want to have. And the second thing you notice is when they tell him, we have a dream. And we need an interpreter. It's clear that it's bothering us enough that we know we need an interpreter. No one can tell us that these dreams have significance. They mean something. What do we do with them? He gives credit to God. He's like, no, God interprets dreams. I still trust the story of God. My God is still good. God is the one who interprets dreams. My God is the one who can do it. He still believes in God. He is still trusting God and saying, all right, tell me, and maybe God will give me the interpretation. That is, in the darkest hour, Joseph is faithful. What I would say is that's what it takes. It takes the type of faithfulness that chooses to love God and love our neighbor. Despite the outcome of where we're at, we will still choose to trust the story of God, to trust the goodness of God, that we don't have to know all the answers, all the things, and we are going to choose to trust his story. We're going to choose to trust the gifts because Joseph's interpreting dreams. I'm going to trust the gifts of God in this season, in this moment, in the darkest dungeon. I'll trust God. I will trust him, and I'll love people. And I'll love the people in the midst of it when they may not can get me anything back. And those two things, that's the measure, right? So the first question I'm going to ask you is, are you being faithful? Are you loving God well and loving people well? When we come to loving people, it's easy to love people when we're encouraging them. Hopefully that's easy for you. To just encourage people, that should be easy. That's low bar. Just tell people that they're good at something. Tell someone that you enjoy their smile, that they're dressed nice, that they look good today. Any number of things that you can just love people well and encourage them. See the gift of God in them and call it out. And if you miss doing that, if you haven't done that in a while, I would just say every time you think a good thought, just say a good thought. It's not hard. Just if you think about someone and you go, you know what, they're so good at such, shoot them a text. It is never going to hurt you to encourage somebody in the things of God and the gifts of God. Maybe even right now you're thinking of that one person, I've never told them how good they were at X. You know what, I've never told them how much I appreciated this. Feel free in this very moment to pull your phone out while I'm preaching and text them to remind them so you don't forget, hey, I just wanted you to know, I really value your gift. I really value your call. I really value what you're doing. But when it gets difficult, that one should be easy. It's easy to implement. We can just put reminders or do it when we think good thoughts. What may be hard for a lot of us is loving people when it's difficult, right? So Joseph has a cupbearer who is an official in Pharaoh's court, and the chief baker, right? They're both in there. They both have dreams. So this is what we're seeing in there. They come to him. They say, here's our dream. The cupbearer says, I have this dream where there's like these vines and these grapes on my head and Pharaoh gets to drink from them. It's fantastic. Oh, that's amazing. And Joseph is like, here's what happens, bro. You're about to be restored. In 3 days, you're going to be back in Pharaoh. You're going to be out of prison. You're going to be back in Pharaoh's court. It's going to be fantastic. And the cupbearer's like, the chief baker's like, I like that news. I want to tell him my dream. Of course, he thinks he's about to get good news. So the chief baker tells him, well, my dream was about some like food on my head and all the birds were eating and I couldn't get it to Pharaoh. And he's like, well, bad news for you, bud. You're not going to make it, right? It gets kind of brutal. You're not going to make it. It would have been easy to lie to the chief baker. It's easy to tell the cupbearer, hey, I got good news for you. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do is shoot people straight. Right? It is easy to love people when they reciprocate. It's easy to love people when it's going to help the relationship. But sometimes we pull back because we don't want to hurt feelings when we know it's the most loving thing to do. What it means in that moment is I love our relationship more. I love my emotions more. I love my thoughts more. I love what you think about me more than I actually love you. Loving people means sometimes saying, I need you to hear this. And you got to have the right heart, but I need you to hear what's about to come. If you don't change your behavior, this is what's going to happen. If you keep acting like this, it's going to be costly. Many times we say we're loving people and we're just enabling people. Girl, go ahead. He's fine. He's going to come around. You know good and well he's been cheating on her for 3 years and he ain't going to change. And you just keep encouraging it. You're watching her go towards a train wreck and you say you're loving because you felt good about what you said to them. Oh, yeah, you deserve it. You've had a hard day. Why don't you go buy you something nice? You know good and well they're in debt and have been debt up to their ears. And they don't need to buy nothing nice. They need to sell a few nice things. And you're just encouraging bad behavior. You're watching people hurt the dreams of God. You're encouraging sin. You're enabling sin, all because you're afraid. You're scared to say the most loving thing. Joseph, in the middle of it, loving God. Hey, give me the interpretation. Let me tell it to you. Encouraging people when necessary and shooting them straight when it's necessary. to say, listen, you may not, and listen, you got to have the right heart. I'm not saying, some of you like saying bad news to people. Not you, hold on. The people who it's hard for, and you can't go any longer without shooting them straight. Like, I got to say this in the most loving way because I care for you. It might be scary. It might be worried about how you're going to respond, but I know that it's the most loving thing to say. No, that's character. That's loving your neighbor in a deep way, in the dark way, and in the dark spots. And so in that moment, you get to decide if you're going to be faithful. In these moments of the seasons of where you're at and where Joseph is at, when you're in the harder seasons, and maybe some of you are in it, you don't get to decide the outcome. When you love your neighbor, when it's going to be hard, you don't get to decide how they respond. They might go, oh my gosh, thank you. I appreciate the encouragement. I've got to stop my shopping habit. I've got to have a hard conversation in my relationship. Oh, thank you so much. I got to get this addiction taken care of. Thank you so much. I really need to face this doctor's report and really face it head on and start praying differently. Thank you so much. I really need to go to therapy and get some help. Thank you so much. I need to get into a brick group. They might tell you that, or they might run for the hills. They might think you're not an encourager. They may not think that you love them. And still, you're going to have to choose to be faithful in this season and trust God with the outcome. I did my part as loving as I could. I followed God's command. I love people. I did my part. It's God's job to do the outcome. My job is faithfulness. His job is output. Mine's input. His is output. So my job in the season, if you're wrestling with faithfulness, the only thing, like if I'm overwhelmed, if I'm Joseph in the middle of the dungeon, I'm struggling, I'm wrestling, the thing that helps me when I'm overwhelmed, it seems like there's too much stuff going on, I don't know what to do next, is God, what's one thing? What's the one next step that I'm called to do? What's the one next faithful step that I'm called to do, and I'll trust you with the rest? One step at a time, one moment at a time, one faithful step is all you need. And Joseph, man, his character is good. So he tells the cupbearer, like, listen, don't forget me. Don't forget me. When you go back to Pharaoh, when this dream is fulfilled, when you get back there, don't forget me. And guess what the cupbearer does? He forgets Joseph. Yep, absolutely. The second he's back with Pharaoh, he's like, woo, let me give you the cup. Cupbearer is an important guy. He's got a very important role. He gets to drink the wine of the Pharaoh. I know that sounds like, well, that's a weird job. No. The Pharaoh doesn't want to be poisoned, so the cupbearer has to take a sip, wait a couple seconds to make sure he doesn't die, and then Pharaoh gets to drink it. Really complicated job. It's risky, but it's easy, right? Here we go. We don't know what germs are yet, so feel free to drink after me, all right? So that's his job. That's his whole job. Just make sure Pharaoh doesn't die and you're good. It's not like he has a complicated job that takes up all his mental space. He can't remember Joseph. He just doesn't care. For 2 years, Joseph is stuck, and still Joseph has the heart of faithfulness. So Pharaoh starts to have a dream 2 years later, and you can see where Joseph's character continues to shine through. Pharaoh has a dream. Top official, all of Egypt, greatest empire that's existing in their day, essentially runs the world as far as all of civilization that we know of at this time in history. I mean, Pharaoh's a very important thing. At some point in Egyptian history, pharaohs start making themselves be gods. That's how important and how powerful they are. Pharaoh has a dream. He has this dream that bothers him and clearly needs an interpretation. He dreams about 7 fat cows coming out of the Nile. We like fat cows. Fat cows are good. Fat cows are good to eat. We all like beef unless you're PETA, and I'm sorry if you are, but we like beef around here. So fat cows come out of apparently the Egyptians did too. Fat cows come out of the Nile. And he's like, great, this is a great dream. This is amazing. And then tells 7 skinny cows show up. And the 7 skinny cows eat the 7 fat cows, and they don't get any fatter. He's like, ooh, that's not good. That can't be a good sign. He has another dream. And his other dream is there's 7 fat crops. The crops are doing great. Look how amazing these crops are. And then there are 7 more crops, and those crops eat up all the other crops. He's like, this isn't good. I need somebody to interpret this dream. This means something. He looks throughout all of his land. He's like, I can't find an interpreter. And the cupbearer's like, oh yeah, I know somebody. After he scoured the whole land, then finally the cupbearer remembers Joseph, who saved his life, helped him have hope and encouragement in the middle of the dungeon. He's like, there was this Hebrew guy. There was when you were mad, you remember that week where you wasn't doing too good, your emotional health wasn't right, and you sent us all to prison? There was this guy there, and I had a dream, and he helped me. So Pharaoh goes to Joseph, tells Joseph the dream, and is about to tell Joseph the dream. He's like, hey, will you interpret this dream? And here's Joseph's response. Here's the thing. Joseph's response in this moment tells me this. He's in the same spot 2 years later. Let's look at Genesis 41, verse 16. So Joseph answered Pharaoh saying, "It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace." Pharaoh says, "I have a dream. Can you interpret it?" "Not about me, not my gift. God will do it. Let's bring peace to you." Pharaoh is coming to Joseph, and Joseph, after 2 years of feeling, he's got to feel, I don't know what his background looks like what his prayer life looks like, how he's sad, how he feels, but he's got to have some questions. He's got to wonder, God, have you abandoned me? Did I ever really have a dream? Did I really have a gift? Am I delusional? What's going on? No. Whatever he thought or prayed about, his actions prove that he is faithful to God. He's faithful to love people, and he's faithful to the call of God, and he keeps dreaming. Yes, he might have had wrestles, and I'm not downgrading your wrestles. Wrestle all you want, but at the end of the day, what he does is take the step. What Joseph does is faithful with his actions. Many of us get caught up in all the questions. We get caught up in all the struggles. It's been 2 years. It's been such a hard time. I don't know what to do. Not Joseph. Joseph's like, "Pharaoh, my God is good. Let me help." He stays in the same love God, love people vein. And what I'm challenging you today is don't get lost and die in your why. You can ask it. I'm not telling you not to ask. I'm not telling you to ignore your doubts. Please don't hear that. I need you to wrestle through your doubts. You're going to have questions about why you feel the way you feel. Why did that happen to me as a kid? Why do I have so many anger issues? Why is this going on? Why am I investing so much in my marriage and it's still struggling? Why in the world are my finances not coming together? Why didn't I get that promotion? God, why did you let this happen to me? Why are you not coming through? I bet Joseph asked all of those questions. And I'm not saying to not, but don't get stuck there. You can't just spin in circles asking questions about why the world works the way it does, why it's happening this way. At some point, you've got to decide what to do. What am I going to do with what I know? What am I going to do with the circumstances I've been given? What am I going to do with the position I've been put in? How am I going to handle this? And Joseph knows, you know what? No matter what I'm questioning, no matter what I may be wrestling with, and I don't know Joseph's wrestle, no matter what is going on in my life, my God is good, and I'm called to love people. That seems to be where he's at. He's just, I'll do the best with what I've been given. And for some of us today, the question is going to be, can I do that? Can I just be faithful one step at a time? Can I get out of my why and my tears and my questions and my wrestles enough to go, I don't even know the answer. I don't know why it happened. I don't know if God let me down. I don't know why I'm in the dungeon. I don't know why I went through this. But what can I do now? I can't fix it. I can't change it, but I can be faithful. I can take the next step. And what you'll find is that for many of those situations, you're going to find out some of your darkest moments, some of your biggest problems were a setup by God. Not that he caused them, but he's not going to let them go to waste. For some of you, you'll find that it seemed like, man, this was super annoying. And as you start to be faithful, some things will just happen. You don't know why. You won't know why. And as you choose to be faithful, you will see your God show up and be like, oh, that moment felt like a real tragedy and a real problem, but it was actually an opportunity. See, for Joseph, he tells Pharaoh the interpretation. He's like, all right, Pharaoh, here's what's going on. Here's about your cows. Here's about your crops. You're about to have 7 really good years. It's going to be feast. Everybody's going to be crushing all the fat cows, all the fat crops. It's going to be great. And then after that, there's going to be 7 years of famine. It's going to be a bad time. So much so that the 7 bad years are going to make the 7 good years look like they never happened. It's going to eat up all the crops. He says, here's what you do. Find someone you trust. Find someone wise in all the land and take back 20% of all the crops in the good 7 years. Take back 20% of all the crops in the good years and store them in every city, every town, everywhere you're at. Store them, and during the lean years, the famine years, you'll be able to sell it. And you'll actually, what we find out is save the world. The world is about to go through a famine, at least their world. You're about to save lives, and God is using this problem to change the world, to save the world. God is using this moment, and Pharaoh goes, wow, Joseph, that's a good idea. So Pharaoh, you would think Pharaoh's job is done. I mean, Joseph's job is done. Like I told him what I need to tell him. And Pharaoh goes, you know who I trust? The one who God gave the interpretation to. He's like, I want you to be that guy. I want you to be in that position. The problem of Pharaoh, the problem of the cupbearer, the problem of the dungeon, all set up an opportunity for God to change and save the world. Maybe we're not Joseph. Maybe he doesn't put us second in the land. Like Joseph gets put second in command of the greatest civilization to date in ancient Egypt. He's second in command. Only one more important than him is Pharaoh. And he gets to fix the world. He gets to save his family. He gets to save the world. Maybe we don't save the world, but maybe we can save our family. Maybe the problems that we're wrestling with, the things that we're struggling with, is a setup for you to save some people around you that you can't see because you've been stuck in your why, you're dying in your questions, and you're not taking the steps. And today I want to challenge you to take the steps. There are problems around you right now that aren't actually problems, they're setups, they're opportunities. They're moments where God is saying, like, it looks like a little thing or a big thing, but I'm about to use it. Oh, you lost your job. No, it's because I got a better one, and you just need to be faithful in this season. Faithful in the gap. Oh, I'm sorry, your marriage is going through something. Yeah, it's because it was mediocre before, and it's time to have a really healthy marriage, and now you're really going to invest in it. Oh, your kids are struggling? That's because I didn't want them to be average. I wanted to have them to be passionate for Jesus, and if they were just doing okay in school and they were just getting through, you would have just coasted. But now it's time to really invest in your kids. They seem like problems, and God is saying, no, I'm putting a highlighter on your life to say, pay attention. This might be an opportunity. I'll give you a couple of examples. They're not extreme. I'm gonna give you a couple of examples in my own life where I've seen opportunities be set, or problems be opportunities. The first one was several years ago. I was in between churches. I was pastoring at my grandparents' church, felt called to step down, and I was like working like 5 jobs, and I wanted to be in ministry. I was called to ministry, but it was boring. I was like, all these jobs are lame. I don't know why you made me do this, God. I was questioning all the stuff, but I was still trying to be faithful. So I showed up, and I was faithful at a church out in Broken Arrow called TheBrick.Church. This is actually the biggest church in the country. They're spread out all over the country. And I was serving in the 1st through 3rd grade class. And I'd applied to be on staff at the church like 3 or 4 months earlier, and they didn't know who I was. They were like, just go do stuff, just serve, just do stuff. I was like, okay, cool. So I'm just serving. I'm just like, God, you'll do what you want to do. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to be on staff anymore. I was like, God, you'll do what I want to do. And so we're in this 1st through 3rd grade class. And in that moment, the computer breaks. And in that setup, there's a person that has a script that's like called an MC, and they're running transitions from the video teaching. It was a really cool setup, really engaging. We had great small groups. But when the computer crashed, she was really good at MCing the transitions. But once that happened, she was deer in the headlights. Like, I was just a small group leader sitting, hanging out with my kids, and I look in the back, and there's staff members just, you know what I'm saying, just unplugging stuff, trying to figure out how to get this computer back in. I'm like, oh, y'all are freaking out. Okay, cool. There's like 60 kids in here, and I'm like, well, this is how I did ministry growing up. Like, everything we did was last minute. I can do this. What's the lesson about? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We acted it out. I kept the kids distracted for a few minutes. They got the computers working, hand the mic back, sat back down in my small group. I didn't think anything of it. It was a huge problem for the staff and the MC. I didn't think anything of it because that's what I was trained in. Last minute ministry is what we did. A few months later, I was praying, God, what do you want me to do? Job came open. I was like, I don't know if I want to do kids ministry. Like, I'm not sure if I'm called to that, but I felt enough peace to apply. So I applied. I get in the room, and the first thing they say is, oh, that's the guy, to the campus pastor who's interviewing. That's the guy who fixed our problem. That's the guy who stepped up when everything was falling apart. They knew my name when I hadn't been there very long. They knew my name because there was a problem for them that God had set up for an opportunity. Maybe a small thing, but God will leverage even the small stuff. Fast forward a few years. We're on staff at TheBrick.Church. Love everything we're doing. God is doing cool stuff. We moved to Moore to help launch the Moore campus. I was the kids pastor there. I was having a blast. I love my campus pastor, love the location. It was just a wild ride. And then we felt God go, hey, you're probably gonna move back to Muskogee. And we're like, no, that's not God. We love. These tornadoes are fine. We'll be just fine in Moore, Oklahoma. Like, this is great. We are okay where we're at. And God kept putting it on our heart, me and my wife, and we were praying about it. And I had the solution. I was like, you know what? Let me look around. No churches are hiring. There wasn't any church I could see myself fitting in or being on staff at. So I was like, what are you going to do, God? There's no opportunities. I'll tell you what, God, if you open the door, I'll walk through it. I thought I was done. 3 months later, I got a phone call. Hey, the network church pastor that is very similar to what TheBrick.Church is doing in Muskogee is stepping down. I was like, oh, that sounds like a door. Are you sure? Are you sure he's stepping down? Sure he wants to quit? Let me call him and see if I can talk him back into staying. So I called the campus pastor. I called the network church pastor. We become really good friends. I start a conversation. What's going on? Why are you stepping down? Are there any red flags? Is everybody okay? He's like, listen, the church is great, man. The board is fantastic. We got great people. They want to see God move. It's just, it's time for us in ministry to take a break. We've been doing it for 20 years. We're in debt. The church is in debt. Nobody did anything wrong. It just, they took faith steps and got in debt. It was just one of those deals where I was like, okay, let's keep walking. Sat down with the board, asked all the questions. Like, one of the questions was, why would you leave a really good paying job at TheBrick.Church to come here for less pay? And I was like, oh, there's money involved? Praise God for that. They're like, oh, no, never mind. We're in debt. We're going to shut the doors if this doesn't work. So I was like, I just want to do what God's called me to do. And it was a problem. It was a problem because they wanted to reach people. It was a problem because there wasn't a way to reach people. And what was a problem became an opportunity. We get to do this. And I'm not, please don't hear me saying, look at what I did. I saved the day. Absolutely not. I still don't know what I'm doing. I'm here and God has been faithful despite me. So like, I'm just proving to you that there are problems that show up that are opportunities for you to step into and God to do big things and amazing, beautiful things. And sometimes if you look at them as problems, you're going to miss out on the faithful step you're called to. You're going to die in your why. You're going to be stuck in the thing that you shouldn't be stuck in. And it's time to recognize like my job is one faithful step. Some things are going to happen, but not everything has to happen, right? There are some things that are coming. The famine is coming. How you handle it is up to you, right? He tells it to Pharaoh like this in verse 32. In verse 32, he says, and the dream was repeated to Pharaoh twice because the thing is established by God and God will shortly bring it to pass. See, there are some things in your life that you brought on yourself. Right? About 97% of our problems is because we saw red flags and we thought it was a carnival. You know what I mean? We just like, oh, this is going to be a good time. Oh, I'm going to date this person. Let's go over here. Like, no, absolutely not. That ride was very unsafe and you knew it. Why'd you get on? Like, it was a bad idea and you got yourself in this position. And some of you are like, my problems are my fault. But the solution is still the same. The answer is still the same. There are some things that you are just in. They're going to come to pass. They're happening, whether you like it or not. It's not your fault that your spouse started acting crazy, but it is your job to be faithful now. It's not your fault that maybe your kids started acting wild, but it is your job to love them as your parent now. You may have had things happen. You may have medical debts that are not your fault, but it is your job to be faithful now. The health issues that you had might not be your fault, but it is your job now to be faithful with the next step and trust God with the outcome. I don't know why you got to where you're at, but the answer is still the same. When I get overwhelmed, when I don't know what to do with the church, when I don't know what to do with my life, I just go, all right, God, you have all of that. You're in charge. I'm your slave. I'm your servant, God. I'll do whatever you want me to do because you called me. This is actually your problem. You just tell me what to do with it. You just tell me how to be faithful in this moment. And what I promise you is if you will be faithful in the dark, if you'll be faithful in the dungeon, if you'll be faithful in the good times and the bad, you're faithful with the input. My God is always faithful with the output. See, Joseph stuck in Egypt for 13 years. 13 years he was in Egypt. Now, when we read stories and we hear about 13 years, we look and go, wow, that's just a brief amount of time. Think about you 13 years ago. Where were you? Just think about your life. If I tell you my life, it feels like another person. It feels like a movie that I'm describing to you because it seems so long ago. It happens in an instant, but when you look back, so much has changed in 13 years. There's so many things that have happened. It feels like a different person. 13 years, he's stuck in this spot, dreaming and believing in the dreams of God, trusting God and just being faithful. And what'll happen is if you'll just be faithful, it may be 6 months, it may be 12 months, it may be 13 years, but you'll look back and you'll go, oh my God redeemed all of that. I was faithful and God took care of it. See, Joseph tells us that his God took care of it, that his God redeemed it. Here's what happens. Joseph gets married. There's 7 years of good. He's second in charge. He's crushing it. Life is good for him in Egypt at this moment. And he has 2 kids. And he names his kids as reminders to what God has done. Genesis chapter 41, verse 51. Joseph called the name of his firstborn Manasseh, for God has made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. 13 years, and in a moment, he looks back and goes, man, I forgot all the stuff that happened in my dad's house. Let me be clear. Joseph didn't forget what his dad's name was or who his brothers were. Joseph is communicating to you, I forgot, meaning it doesn't weigh me down anymore. It is not my baggage that I'm carrying. It's not the trauma of my life. It is not a thing that sticks in my brain every day and wakes me up at night and sweats, right? You have some things where you wake up at night and you think about them and they cause turmoil to you. They cause trauma to you. They're issues that you think back on and your blood pressure raises. Joseph is saying, that doesn't happen anymore. I'm not staying awake at night. My son Manasseh, that one, he's there because he reminds me that I'm not stuck in the past. That I don't have to question anymore why my father didn't come look for me. I don't have to question anymore about my brothers because my God has redeemed the time. And he says, Ephraim reminds me that I'm not just weightless from my past, but I'm actually fruitful in the place that Satan would have used to afflict me. That right there, that's the power of faithfulness. A God who redeems the time, a God who looks like it's been 13 years. There's no way. No, there is a way, because that's my God's job and that's what he does. If you will be faithful with your input, if you will be faithful with your time, and you will be faithful with every step he gives you in the midst of the good and the bad, he will be faithful to bring your dreams to fruition. You will see things that you never thought possible, things that 13 years ago you thought died along with the trauma, along with the issue, and you'll see God redeem things you never thought could be redeemed. And our job is faithfulness. Let's pray.
We are so excited that you're here today. If you heard that message and you feel like God's calling you to take the next step of trusting your life to him, then what we would love for you to do is text the phrase, I have decided. And what it does, it lets us know how we can reach out to you so that we can help you understand that this is not a life you've been called to walk alone, but there's a community here at TheBrick.Church that wants to walk alongside you as you become everything that God has called you to be. And again, we want to say thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. It's allowing us to take this message so much more than just four walls, but to the world. And if you're really passionate about being a part of that and you want to give to us financially to partner with what God's doing at TheBrick.Church, then what you can do is you can text the phone number on the screen. And that's going to link you to a credit card, a debit card, or a bank account, but however you give. As a church, we say thank you so much. There are lives all over the world that are different because of what you are a part of here today. And we love you so much. We hope you have a beautiful week, and we can't wait to see you next time.